Graphing can be an extremely powerful tool in understanding our data. We can use graphs to answer questions about relationships within our data or to tell a visual story about our data to an audience. A clearly made plot is a very important tool. Here, I'm going to give you an introduction to the Tidyverse plotting package ggplot. This is a nice, versatile package that you can easily build on. At its core, the code for ggplot is simple and comprised of a few necessary components. First, as with any package, we should load our library. ggplot can be loaded independently or by loading the Tidyverse package. To start plotting with ggplot, we must call the ggplot function like this. The first argument we will define is our dataset. For example purposes, we'll simply call this data. If you ran just this code, even with a real dataset, you will get back an empty square. That's because, while you've told R that you want to make a plot, you haven't given it the information as to what variables to plot or how to plot them. So to do that, we will need to add more information to our code. We will start by adding the plus symbol. This is a specific ggplot function that you can think of as adding a layer to your plot. In our previous bit of code, all we got was a blank square. Now, we're going to tell R to add a layer to our plot using the plus symbol. Next, we have to tell R what to layer onto our plot. For ggplot, the next layer is typically the geom. This part of the function is telling ggplot what sort of plot to make. There are a variety of geoms, such as geom point, which makes a scatter plot, or geom bar for bar plots. You can choose the geom for the type of graph you want to make, but if you're not sure what sort of geoms you should use with the variables you want to plot, you can check out the website data2viz.com. On this website, you'll find an interactive tree in which you can choose the types of variables you have and explore the types of graphs that you can make using those variables. Once you have a geom picked out, you need to define a few more parameters. Importantly, you need to tell ggplot which variables to map to x and y. In our example code, you can see that we did so by typing mapping equals AES x, y. AES is an important component of your ggplot code. This is where you set the aesthetic information. This must include x and y information, but can also include information like color or size of your data points. Additionally, a tip to consolidate your code. You do not need to write out mapping equals in your code. You can simply omit that and write instead this. So now that we know the backbone of the ggplot code, let's try to plot some data. Let's use a dataset already loaded into R called iris. You can call up this dataset by typing data iris. I always like to browse my dataset before plotting it using the glimpse function. Here we see this dataset contains petal and sepal measurements for different species of iris. Let's use a plot to determine the relationship between petal width and petal length. Then we will add a geom. We have two numerical variables. I think a simple scatter plot would do the trick. Let's add it to our code by first adding our plus sign, followed by the geom, and in this case, geom point. Finally, we need to tell ggplot which variables from the dataset to plot. Since we wanted to determine if there's a relationship between the length and width of petals, those are the variables we will use. Let's set length as our x value and width as our y. Let's execute it. Congratulations! You've created a plot in ggplot. We wanted to know whether there was a relationship between length and width of petals. Our plot shows us that there is, but interestingly, it appears that there are two distinct groups of petals, which we could call small and large, but nothing in this range here. Before we finish, I'll add one more tip. You may see ggplot code written without a lot of the components I've showed you today. For example, for the plot we just made, you may see the code written like this. This code results in the same plot that we made before, but with less explicit information. For your data, x and y arguments, feel free to leave out the data equals or x or y equals once you're more comfortable using ggplot. So now you know the basics of ggplot, Happy plotting!